And the title of this panel talk is StarkNet's Future in Asia, Insights from Global Community Experts. So I brought Sam from Europe, and Kanho, I think you should turn on the, yeah. And we brought Kanho from US. And we brought Gyan from Starkware, I think India, right?
Yes, perfect.
And Chi from Malaysia. And here is BC from StarkNet Asia. So I want to start asking to Sam, could you provide us with an overview of the current state of StarkNet's ecosystem in your region? Yeah.
Oh, in Europe. So I think that, yeah, there is definitely a strong community, StarkNet community in Europe. Cairo, the official pronunciation for Cairo used to be Cairo. And I think that there is something that comes from the fact that, yeah, we have a lot of folks in France that started dabbling and exploring with the first iterations of the Cairo language. What could be the source of that? I'm happy to dive a little bit deeper. But yeah, I think that overall there's definitely a lot of traction with Cairo in Europe. I can speak for France, but I see that in Prague or in the UK with Argent, there are a lot of meetups that are well maintained. There's Israel that's nearby, even though that's not really Europe. We're from the epicenter, so that kind of helps. And yeah, I definitely think that Europe is the most vibrant area when it comes to the adoption of StarkNet. Let's put it this way. And a lot of initiatives are maintained to bootstrap the StarkNet community there.
What about you, Kanto? How about the US?
In the US, I think it's not as strong as in Europe, but it's up and coming. A lot of people, I think, is more familiar with other rollups, and primarily I think it's because people are more focused on, I think, growth in the US. But I do understand there's a substantial presence in terms of quality projects coming from the United States. We do have Cartridge in the United States, in New York. They're one of the major players in terms of wallets for gamings. So Dojo is an open source project led by Cartridge. It's fascinating project. So if anyone wants to build ECS-based fully on-chain games, they should look into Dojo and Cartridge. And I love their wallet product. It's very easy to use. And topology, I think we do have a couple of members based in the United States, and we do hold conferences in US when there's an Ethereum conferences happening. Recently we did Stark Denver and in San Francisco, and planning to do some events in New York and Boston area. So it's definitely growing, but it's more of a subset of an Ethereum crowd, and more interested in what is happening in ZK rollup space. Yeah, and I do think the crowd is going, but not as big as in the US, where we can hold a separate event primarily for StarkNet. But I do know that in France, you guys have a very big crowd over there. Maybe it's because of Louis.
Yeah, I'm wondering, how about you, like in India, how's the?
Yeah, so I think similar sentiments to US, probably not as big as Europe. I think no community is as big as Europe, especially France. We have a huge presence there. But India has a lot of young and upcoming crowds. So you see, like, there are tens and thousands of engineering universities, not even students, just universities, out of which engineering students are graduating. And now there is this this introduction of Web3 and the idea of decentralization, where people have an equal say in terms of how they get paid, how they want to work, and just the overall of idea of power being concentrated with people's hands is a very lucrative opportunity for people to get into Web3. And that is what I feel is attracting more people to Web3, be it developers, be it investors, or be it the engineering students, the young fresh crowd. So there is a lot of interest in general, but even in terms of Ethereum and a strong Ethereum community, we have very small, very concentrated communities. It's not, and India is a huge country, like 1/6 of the world's population is based in India. So it's like billion plus people. So these small, having small concentrated communities doesn't help as much. We need more large scale communities that can speak to all the different states, all the different kinds of people that are based in India. And that's the sort of effort that I am trying to put in. Even I think the general learning mechanism and the education patterns are very similar in Southeast Asia, right? Dedicated people are interested to invest time in learning new things that they think can benefit them in long term. And then even the idea of stability, right, like having stable jobs, being able to earn a fixed income, is very common across the Asian region. So I think some of these are things that we are trying to focus on, or trying to bring the narrative that there are good remote working opportunities and things like that in Web3, and it's not different from your Web2 jobs. Like, you're basically using the same tech, you're still going to be using React or Next or whatever for the front end stack, and just need to learn a bit more about the back end stack and how the blockchain networks work as such, and then from that perspective. So it's a growing community, and I think given that different Asian counterparts are coming together and doing things like this, it's going to grow only much larger.
Yeah, building upon the previous question, what factor do you believe have contributed to relative growth and adoption on the StarkNet in Europe?
So in Europe, okay, I think that there are a few factors, elements that could explain that high level of adoptions that we observe in European countries. I'll take the example of France. I think that there's definitely a strong culture, a strong heritage of teaching mathematics. We have a lot of companies that specialize in formal verification, cryptography, and things that gravitate around that. And I think that Cairo is a really beautiful invention that can capture the interest of fellow graduate engineers or people who are studying this. It's maybe something that's aligned with the whole, with the way we teach things over there. So that's one thing. And there are also other factors to take into account. As you said, Louis, the head of ecosystem, is based in Israel, but actually grew up in France. So he definitely has an edge there and some connections that could help foster the development of the Cairo ecosystem over there. Who else? There's Henry, who's leading the advocate teams, if I'm right, who is also from there. We've seen some different gatherings happening, meetups in Paris that are launched by the community. There's also StarkNet's CC that's community owned, and that had already that happened last year in Paris, if I'm right, and gathered an important part of the community. What else? Also, there's an impulse from Starkware side. I think one of the core gatherings of the different committees that are involved in decision making for the StarkNet ecosystem. One of these gatherings was done in Paris, if I'm not mistaken. That also plays a role as placing Europe and Paris in a good position within that ecosystem. That gives it a bit more of a kick. And I think that is what plays a role. I've taken the example of France, but then it kind of radiates. It has an impact on neighboring countries. and also some other startups that are well involved within the StarkNet ecosystem are based in Belgium or in the UK. I think that's the case of Argent. Israel is not that far, and it's much easy for these different entities to organize initiatives in nearby countries. While when you have to cross the ocean or 8,000 kilometers eastwards, it becomes a little bit trickier to project your company, give workshops. So I think that the main challenge is about having different epicenters that expand the whole StarkNet culture ecosystem, Cairo 1.0. Yeah, that are not only based in Paris, but beyond. Maybe one antenna for North America, one in Asia. Like I think Door Labs is doing an amazing job. And if I think I've seen that there's going to be a StarkNet summit in San Francisco. So that's also a great avenue to take things to another level in North America. But yeah, teaching, like strong mathematical heritage, a lot of things between France and Israel, bordering countries, and voila.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think the most factor that you just said, I think US also has that, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a strong presence of understanding of the importance of ZK rollup and Start systems across, I think, Cambridge area in the U.S. and also the Mountain View, that area where top universities are. So there are students very much interested in StarkNet, specifically the ZK rollup space. But just like what Sam said, I think the difficult part is the disseminations of information. You know, the reason why we gathered over here is even if we can meet on Telegram or Twitter, it's always best to meet in person to really, I think, encapsulate or mesmerize the person about the technology and the prospect of the network. I think that can probably be done a lot better in Europe when Starkware teams based in Israel and have team members over there. But I do understand that there is an initiative from StarkNet Foundation and also Starkware side to expand more in Sanford and New York and Boston areas. I was just at San Francisco for a meetup with Mamit. He's one of the teams at StarkWare in terms of the developer advocate area. So there is a growing community, and I think there will be more and more people interested in this area. But I do understand it's a tad bit difficult area for people to get into as compared to, I think, Solidity, because they do need to learn the math and everything. And I think this kind of workshop-based meetups or conferences is very helpful for other developers to get into the ecosystem.
I would just like to add one small critical input. We haven't succeeded in Europe. There's a strong resistance in Eastern Europe. I think that's also this phenomenon has its reasons, but other validity rollups are carried by folks that are from these countries or have ties with these countries. And I think it's a little bit tougher for StarkNet and the stack to get past the Eastern, to get traction in Eastern European countries.
I think that there is high correlations with, let aside the technological advantages or superiority, but more so in connections with cultural ties and proximity to the teams that are working, because I think a lot of people, when they choose what they want to work on, may not really be about like what's the best thing that I can do at this moment, but more so like, oh, my friend's working there, or like, oh, person that I trust or person that I admire is working over there. So a lot of those nuanced cultural assimilations do factor in quite a bit when people choose what they want to work on.
Yeah, like Kano and Sam said, those are the reasons that I run. Why the reason why I run this Circuit Asia, and I always include workshop at the end. Like just not just networking. As I don't think that's the core objective of this event. So I always let people to uh, um, study how to code in Cairo and stuff at the end, so that it really helps the ecosystem itself.
Yeah, I do agree. I think for my objective, when I look at the ecosystem, um, with a little bit of background with Ethereum Foundation's strategy and growth part, I think it's more important to attract 5 developers who are passionate about StarkNet and building things on top after this conference, instead of having thousands or 10,000s people asking about when is the token coming out, or like what's the speculations behind the token. I think those are the noises that we need to stay away from and make it more coming from more first principles perspective. If we can actually promote a healthy growth mindset in terms of growing the ecosystem, of having important, I think, parts of the ecosystem being built by new developers onboarding, I think that's more important than having 1,000 people coming to a conference and throwing out fancy T-shirts and fancy venues. I think that could be quite unhealthy in the future in a longer perspective. Yeah.
What do you think about this, G?
Interesting that you guys brought up some things that I would like to echo, just add on. Southeast Asia was previously, I think 2 years back, no one really cares about Southeast Asia. We have some companies like Kyber from Vietnam, Interscan from Malaysia. They are from the Southeast Asian region, but I don't think anyone really knows. But thanks to the Ethereum Foundation suddenly announced that Southeast Asia is going to host DEF CON, I think a lot of people realize that, oh, it's an untapped market. So I think Southeast Asia, the group in Southeast Asia benefits from the from that attention, and from running a local organized local meetups point of view, we do see an increase of attendees to our events or workshops, especially the one on StarkNet. I think last year there was like 10 people. There were 10 joining the workshop, and this year the last workshop basically doubled the attendees, and I didn't expect that. And one strategy that what I would like to use to encourage people to build on StarkNet or whatever Web3 tech is that I would encourage you to join hackathons with some of us examples. I think some of them were here now. Workshops are fun. You learn, you write some code, but at the end of the day, people will not have the initiative to continue. So what gives people the initiative? Like hackathons. Like they think of an idea, they have been through the idea generating process, and they can apply it from time to time, and that will keep them in the space, keep them developing the space, which I think that's why Pragma hackathon is a good idea. And we have seen, like I've seen in my local community that there are like many people interested in Pragma hackathon. So I think that's a good start at least in the Malaysia scene. And you mentioned cartridge.gg. We actually have one guy who was entirely new last year, less than a year ago. He came to the StarkNet Cairo workshop, and now he's just employed by cartridge.gg. So that's really cool. So we hope to see more of that examples. Like I'm from Nethermind. I work remotely from Malaysia. He's from Malaysia. He works remotely to cartridge.gg. So that's what we are trying to encourage people. We try to have these examples, and these examples, like what Kunho said, people that they respect, people that they think is cool, and they want to follow on their footsteps. So we really encourage. That's what basically what I want to say. Echoed by many of you already. Thank you.
Maybe it's a good thing that we didn't have that surge in when it comes to the StarkNet adoption, because maybe the tech isn't ready to onboard or to welcome thousands of developers. And like we spoke about Volition today, there are a lot of exciting things that are coming up. The possibility to build your own StarkNet app chain and L3 with potentially Madara as a sequencer and different DA systems. That's really exciting. That broadens the scope of what can be done on StarkNet. And people will get to discover StarkNet with Cairo 1.0, which is significantly different compared to the first iterations of the language. So they'll get to discover StarkNet and Cairo in its in a better shape and ready to welcome all sorts of business logics.
Okay, so from a global perspective, what are some opportunities and potential benefits that StarkNet could bring to the Asia market? What do you think, Chi?
The simplest, straightforward answer will be people working remotely for a company that is based in other countries. In Malaysia, the living cost is very low, so that is basically like something that you can shout out like, "Oh, I work remotely for a company in the US," but that's very shallow, right? What I think is will be really cool is that in Malaysia actually, I'm sorry if I offend anyone, is that it would be really cool to see like a third Web3 based company. So I've always been telling people like, oh, this came from Malaysia. Recently people asking me like, oh, so many years we have heard of this name. Like, what any other third big companies are coming up from Malaysia? So that got me thinking like, why not we start another one? So I think so it would be very cool if we somehow through all these hackathon ideas, through these meetups or these beta sessions, someone generate a very cool idea. Probably me, probably anyone else. I'm more than happy for anyone to in Malaysia or anyone who wants to be based in Malaysia to have this great idea and start like a third company. And I believe that will be like a shedding point. Like once a third company starts up, many will soon to follow. Like and then we will have a greater development community. Like, so we are able to then let people know that you can work in this company, and it will be like an avalanche of devs getting interested in the Web3 and StarkNet industry. So that's what I would say.
What about you, Kat?
Yeah, so I think from an advantage perspective, there are two things. One is because StarkNet is at such an early stage, we are yet to see like this surge of startups that are coming up on StarkNet. We are yet to see like a lot of cool ideas that could potentially be built on StarkNet. And every workshop that I go to, there's this misconception that only zero knowledge based privacy ideas can be built on StarkNet. No, basically you can build anything on StarkNet. So there are so many cool ideas that have the potential to be built. And given that Asia, most of the Asian countries are used to building products or using products which are at scale. So for example, India, right? You have to build a product that 1 billion users can use. Otherwise, it will just not be, nobody will be able to use that product. So people are used to building products that function at scale. And in Web3, that is a huge missing link, right? So there is a huge gap here that can be filled by people who are starting their own ideas, by people who are wanting to build their own ideas in Asia, right? So in Asian region, there's a huge space for entrepreneurship, especially building cool projects on StarkNet, and also to build products that will be, automatically adopted by masses. And once 1 billion users start using a product, it's automatically going to get noticed, right? So that's one open area. And the second is, as Chi already mentioned, many of the Southeast Asian countries, including and India, have a very low cost of living. And the working conditions for developers is not super great, right? They always get to work on projects that are mostly testing projects, automation projects, and things like that. All of the core work is done in like US, European regions. But now there is an open possibility for Asians to actually get involved in core tech work and contribute as core developers and earn at a global standard, right? Not just Indian standard or for example, salaries in Manila, Philippines, salaries in India, Bangalore are very low as compared to salaries in the Western world. But Web3 gives you an opportunity to earn an income which is, at a global standard. So these are some very lucrative opportunities for developers to get into Web3. And I feel the third and the most important advantage is that people already know the tech. Like, there are so many developers in India and in Southeast Asia who have been working on just technology as developers day in and day out. You see a lot of Western countries, people learn development from scratch. Like, they start with JavaScript and then they go to Rust and then they become Cairo experts, whatever. But in most of the schools in Asia, just development and mathematics is taught as part of the syllabus. So people already know development. Most of them already know like basic JavaScript. So that's a great advantage for them to immediately start in Web3 because they have some background. They just need to put in like very minimal, effort and of course maximal amount of time understanding things. So I think these are some like open areas that Asians can come in and sort of fill, and yeah, sky's the limit.
Yeah, I think, Sam, you can also answer this question because you live in Korea, right?
I think we've had yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have the pretension to know more about how to develop StarkNet in Asia, as I'm still testing the waters and trying to figure out how things work here. But in fact, you need to opt for a strategy that fits the local scene, the local culture, and do some adjustments to have maximal impact. And yeah, what would I do if I have to grow the StarkNet ecosystem in Asia? I would say something very generic. I would try to pick something that's that's characteristical, that you only have in Asian countries, in Asian cultures, and I'll try to see if there isn't a story that can be told or something that can be built that kind of updates or revisits or twists this thing that is so important to Asians, Asians as a whole. And of course, there are a lot of nuances from one country to another, with all respect. That's probably like the first path that I would explore. I try to figure out what they're so attached to, and see if I cannot create an initiative or gather them in a place that's meaningful to them, and create a story that speaks to them, maybe.
And I believe more exposure can make more products and divs in the ecosystem. So I will try to host as many as events as possible in Asia, so that more divs can meet the ecosystem leaders and the projects in person, so that they can learn from them and talk and get more positive impact from them.
Yeah, and one, I think, being the devil's advocate, one counter argument that I could form is that I don't think we have to think about like how to strategize to grow in Asia or certain continents. I think building an ecosystem is more of a global projects, and how I think about building an ecosystem or theory or any layer 2 on top of it. It's more of a job of building a nation. So when you think about it, when you go to an empty land and you have this grand vision of create like a nation where millions of people can live in this land, when you're starting it, you actually don't want a million people coming right now because there's nothing built yet. And the thinking that we need to have is more so like, how can we attract like 5 or 6 builders who can build dams, who can build roads, who can build, I don't know, basic government structures, a voting structure. We don't need a lot of people. It's just like, there's a saying that you only need one Einstein who can feed a million people. So I think this mindset of like, let's attract as many people as possible may not be the most accurate way to go at this point of the StarkNet ecosystem. And maybe that's why we attract very talented people in this field, because they see the potential of their creation being able to be used a million people in the future, in 5 years or 10 years. We need those visionaries who can actually build this infrastructures or applications that is going to be used in the future. Because that's why, if you look at all of the interesting projects, are very open source and could have a potential to be massively used in the future, just like Kakarot or Dojo or any of these Madeira fun projects out there. And at this point, I don't think we need like 1 million people mesmerized about StarkNet. We only need maybe 100 people around the world who are crazy about it and can discuss for hours and hours without getting paid, and happy to do so because it's something that they believe is one of the most interesting things that they can do in this world at this point of life.
I would like to add some more depth to my previous answer. I didn't mean reaching out to millions or onboarding the next billion users on StarkNet. That gives me shivers. I just meant that in order to maybe get the best, and also not giving like financial incentives to attend an event, that would be helpful. I just meant that in order to get like the reasonable impact for each event that is organized, maybe it is better to find some examples that are a bit more meaningful, some contexts that are a bit more meaningful to the local scene, but without extending it in an embarrassing way or sending Google Ads or doing stuff like that. I just meant maybe trying to find something that bridges the local culture with what StarkNet is trying to achieve. But I actually agree with most of what you said. Yeah.
Okay, so looking ahead, what do you envision as the future of StarkNet in Asia? Like, are there any trends or developments that you anticipate will drive increased adoption and growth in the region? I would ask this question to BC.
Right. I believe, like, as a person who runs this StarkNet Asia, I should say it's gonna be bigger than now. And the thing that we build in Dual Labs is to let the users does not need to know about the Web3, but they will use StarkNet. For example, the registration that you did before to get into this event, we upload all the information on the StarkNet with the QR scanning, but nobody knows that it's on StarkNet, right? So we are trying to make these use cases to make more users and divs to experience this StarkNet ecosystem without knowing what is Web3 or what is StarkNet. But I will try to make this even big and big. Yeah.
Yeah, more events, more hackathons, and not having high expectations that you need 1 million people from Asia onboarding right now. We hope so in the future when we have the infrastructures and every parts and bits to work. But I think we're at very early stage of this nation building vision, and think of it as like we only have 2-lane dirt road right now. But in the future, we want like a massively high highways being built already, and so that people can drive cars, and somebody can make, I don't know, movie theaters and whatever you want to call it.
I always like that analogy, this metaphorical approach that you take with nations and growing a protocol, an ecosystem. And yeah, it's not a federal state. Maybe we'll need to do some adjustments to fit the needs of again of one country or another, etc. But I won't say anything groundbreaking here. I think that more events, more hackathon, more education will definitely contribute to to growing the StarkNet ecosystem in Asia. And yeah, it has to be done in the most organic and pure way as possible in order to keep that culture that is so unique within the StarkNet ecosystem. I think that there's really something really special about that community. And I think that the fact that the way things have been brought and the way initiatives and events have been carried out plays a strong role by respecting a lot, not the prospects, but the potential persons that can attend to these events, by really like triggering people's curiosity and not being too pushy. We managed to attract some really amazing folks that themselves become advocates of the technology, and we'll take it forward in the future. So I think it's very important.
Yeah, one thing that I just thought about is that, when you look at the nation building of any country, going from the kingdom to constitutional governments, that was something that was freshly disseminating. I don't know, there's a Declaration of Independence from the United States, or French Revolution, what you want to call it. Maybe that's why we have a lot of crowd in France. I mean, the whole constitutional government in the world kind of stemmed from the French Revolution, revolting against your monarch and need to make some kind of democratic or completely new form of government. And if you look at the burgeoning or the starting point of these new ideas of forms of, I mean, if you look at the constitutional government, monarch, or even communism, it's a brand new idea of how to coordinate the community that you're in, and how do we incentivize it, and how we divvy up the assets. And I think it's in that perspective, all these new types of government is just like a gimmick from fiddling around with, like, how do we distribute the assets, or how do we incentivize the individual participants to participate in greater community that we have. And that's why I think creating an ecosystem, a global ecosystem on blockchain is more of a nation building activity. And if you look at like Ethereum or any kind of blockchain that we see, it's more of a coordination machine now. So we're having some limited resource out there, and how do we divvy up, or who gets more access to this world computer that we call Ethereum, and StarkNet is on top of it. But going back to the nation building analogy, when you look at the pictures of the creators or the founders of the United States, that you call it, well, nobody owns the United States, or even for communism, like when you look at the pictures of the Marxists, or like these people gathering around in France, I don't know whether this is the right content to talk in this country, but if you look at the burgeoning starting point of the communism or the capitalism world, it started with like 30 people around the world just gathering around, drinking, sipping coffee and drinking. And probably back then, people were probably saying that these are the craziest people out there, thinking that they could divvy up the assets in a completely new way. That's how I see about all these blockchains coming up, and especially for layer 2 and StarkNet too. So I think it will take time, but the fact that we have 30 of us or 40 of us gathered over here and thinking and talking about these ideas, it is quite fascinating that we can even attract those people to come talk about something that has no financial incentive, or people are just coming here for pure enthusiasm. The fact that they can participate in this nation building is a very positive sign that we're seeing.
Yeah, I agree. I think from what I saw last year I participated in a hackathon at ECC in Paris, and that's how I got into the StarkNet ecosystem. And from what I've seen last year in Asia to now, there's been so much more amazing stuff that's happened. There are people self-hosting meetups. Like, I spoke to a lot of folks in the audience who were interested in hosting meetups in their own countries in Asia. And I'm also kind of, encouraging them to start scaling this, start talking to your friends, get them involved into your projects, etc. And there is interest. And I think that says that talks hugely about the work that has already been done with various communities in Asia, like Door Labs largely, of course, and then we have been working with the Phoenix Guild in India for them to do host meetups across India, a lot of different states in India, different cultures, but people are interested. So I think it's a huge leap. And also, as BC already mentioned earlier, that larger exposure will lead to people actually getting more involved. It's at the end of the day, it's just still going to be that 30-40 people who are going to be building core applications. But even to get those 30-40 highly talented people who are willing to put in that time and effort to learn, we need to expose them to all of these things. So I hope to see a lot more like hackathons and a lot of collaborative efforts between Asian countries working together. Vietnam, I've heard, is a huge builder hub. Seoul, of course, I've heard a lot about Seoul. That's why I came to this trip. Otherwise, I was gonna skip and directly to Vietnam. But I'm glad I came and I got to meet so many people. Singapore, a lot of people interested there. India, of course. So I think people collaboratively doing things together, having some mind sharing in terms of strategizing for community building, for optimizing to get the best developers. I feel like all of these things have already started, but doing more of these things together down the line 6 to 9 months, I feel like in the next 1 year, I'm optimistic of getting some good projects on StarkNet from Asia, and that's like my goal as well.
Yeah. Finally, the last question. I know that some of you are not dev, but is there any projects that you anticipate on StarkNet? I mean, mostly these days.
I can take that. So recently, my team joined a hackathon, and we're doing some ZK and ML stuff. And Jinsuk over there is talking to my team right now. So I got him, brainwash him into getting machine learning stuff on StarkNet. So machine learning stuff, it's probably the next thing on StarkNet, I hope. So because ZKML kind of stuff. So and I see that StarkNet doing more efficiently, stuff like that. So actually, we are talking about it, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I would say ZKML stuff. There's Giza, which is already working on ML based sort of engines associated with StarkNet and all of that. It's a very cool project. And then there's the ongoing Madara, which is a potential sequencer, and app chains. So I think app chains in theory is becoming very popular as people can run their own individual potential blockchains for their use cases, etc. So I think these are some of the cool things that we hope to see. I'm also seeing like every week there's a new project popping up on community calls. So really, like if any of you all have great ideas that you want to discuss or want to build, like literally we are open to having a conversation, helping you get that first step forward. So yeah, sort of sly shilling in this answer as well. But I'm excited for all of these. I feel like there are a lot of, as Kuno mentioned, there are a lot of visionaries working in the StarkNet space who don't see this as just like StarkNet, but also like a engineering advancement, like a engineering marvel kind of product. And these are some things which I'm excited for down the line 5 years. When people start using these engineering marvels, it's going to be very exciting on how this unfolds, from a user perspective.
And I'm particularly excited about on-chain games. So we mentioned a lot the ECS, the Dojo initiative, and all the applications that actually use that toolkit. And I'm excited to see how Realms is going to develop, but also Influence and other games that are built on top of StarkNet. The works that has been done by Topology, on-chain on-chain realities, physics are definitely very exciting things to follow. And I think that once L3 will actually be ready, we'll hopefully see more games popping up and some good ones among them. And that could be, that could potentially attract some a lot of users, and that's really exciting to see. And yeah, maybe also some privacy as an L3 on top of StarkNet, since now we can verify snarks on top of StarkNet. That would be nice to see.
Yeah, I think most interesting projects, I think, is utilizing the additional compute capacities on StarkNet on Ethereum. So I think having this notion that Ethereum is the world computer. So for the first time in the humanities, like everyone over here has their own laptop. So my laptop, but we first figured out how to have a global computer where multiple users can have access to. And how we think about it at topology is more so like, there's layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, whatever you want to call it. And additional compute capacity that comes from it is bettering this world computer, just like what we've seen from CPU accelerations. So we're seeing the compute capacity of this world computer that is accessible to a lot of different people around the world. Think of it as like, if there's a globe, there's one computer on top of it, and everyone has access to this computer. Whereas this time, we have our phones or computers that is only accessible to us, and we log into internet where this device can have access to. But it's a little bit different this time in a way that we figured out this imaginary computer that is accessible to everyone. So I think we're going to see a very interesting path of emergence of new technology, just like what we've seen from Mark I computer to personalized computers with GUI and mouse. Something similar will also happen with this world computer, and StarkNet being one of the frontiers of bettering this world computer compute paradigm, bettering the CPU capacity, something like just what Intel did for the personalized computer world previously. So that's why we're super excited about StarkNet, and hopefully in the future someone will do something that can better this world computer. So I think it's good for everyone over here to have some mindset that it is really not about solely about StarkNet, but more so thinking of in a bigger scope, like, okay, we now have this world computer. What are the necessary steps that can be done because we see this compute capacity of this computer getting better and better? And one thing that we can easily think about is that, like when we have first had computers and when its compute capacities were getting better, we had the emergence of like gaming, like the worlds that you can simulate on, or like the ML parts, like you can actually have more compute capacity, so you can now calculate things more. And I don't know, right now we can do LLM now, but I'm sure back in the days when the computer came about, people can imagine the future where, oh, if we can do so much calculation so quickly, we can deduce some inferences here and there and move on from that. Just like when the computer first came about, people thought about like the MMORPG world where you can log into the world and multiple people collaborating. So, and I think this is the time where our imaginations run a lot faster than the advancement of technology. But that's a great thing, because once you understand that, oh, it's a world computer, it's getting faster, what can be done? And we can probably learn a little more from a history of development of interfaces of this machine.
Yeah, I think your answer is good like sentences to finish this panel talk. Thank you, everyone. This is it. And Busy from Dual Labs, and Kanho from Topology, and Sam from Nord Guardians. Sorry about that. Chi from Nethermind, and Jan from Starkware. Thank you.